Hey everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here, Proven Health Alternatives. I've got professional race car driver, Lawson Aschenbach with me, a good friend, a great guy, and you're going to love the time we spend with him. Lawson, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh man, I've been waiting to get you on, and I know you're so busy. That's why we had to pre-record it, but they're going to love all the things that you have because you've got a great history. Um, Let me just get right into it. Tell me a little bit about your background and your racing background.
Yeah, no problem. I'm a professional race car driver, and I've been a pro since 2006. But my history was a lot of go-karting when I was younger. I got into the amateur levels of open wheel racing for a while, and made a switch to sports car racing in '05 that ended up being the right call. And I was fortunate to do very well. Got picked up. And ever since that day or that year, I've got about 7 championships and somewhere around 40 or 50 wins, and just trucking along here. So really fortunate to have a career like this. I love it, love every minute of it. And thanks to you, I feel like I'm doing a lot better at it too. So all good.
Well, you have an interesting story, and I never realized, where I'm from in New York City, the only time you see a race car is when the state troopers are chasing after anybody and everything like that. And we know that's not you, but
Right.
what kind of cars you drive? Like people, like when I told them they were coming on, what do you drive? What is it that you do? That kind of stuff.
So the type of racing that I do is called sports car racing, and what we race are cars that you see on the street. I personally am racing a Mercedes AMG. The car that you see on the street, or I guess the street version of it is the AMG GT. It's kind of a long front nose Mercedes sports car, high performance sports car. But we race against Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Audis, Porsche, Aston Martin, BMW. You name it, they're in our sport. Anything that's kind of a high-end exotic car. So even though the cars start as street cars, they're quite highly modified, but the basic silhouette, the basic shape, and the basic components of the cars are still from the street. So it's a great proving grounds for manufacturers. That's why so many of them are in it. And I can tell you this, that the competition's fierce. We've got, I can't remember how many teams, but maybe somewhere around 20-ish teams in our series. Anybody can win on any given weekend. And on top of that, we do things such as 100-minute long sprint races all the way up to 24-hour endurance races. And those 24-hour endurance races we'll do with 3 or 4 drivers doing 2-hour rotations roughly, sometimes 3-hour rotations. And, when you're doing that for that long, you can probably imagine how physically taxing that is. Not to mention the fact that we're dealing with extreme heats, G-forces, constant movements in the car, whether it's your arms or feet, and, the sort of all-important focus level. And making sure that you can do that throughout that run is very important. So it's a very difficult sport. It's much more difficult than people realize, from a physical side and a mental side. But I've been fortunate to do this a long time and love every minute of it.
Yeah, I think that was a great explanation. Most people don't realize, and I always kid you about the need to be in shape and the athleticism. And, you're a
Right.
professional athlete.
Yep.
And I would love for you to share your workout regimen and what you have to do to prepare to do all those things, both mentally and physically. It's not like
Yeah.
you have a beer on Monday through Friday, race on Saturday, and you win on Sunday and drink some milk. It's kind of not like that.
No, that's a good point. No, it's a lot more in depth than people realize. I mean, we just from a training perspective, if let's say I'm not racing a certain week, I've got a 6-day plan, sometimes 7-day plan, and it's involving a lot of explosive movements. That's a bit for reaction timing. Everything from you can imagine deadlifts, rowing, running, biking, kettlebell stuff, weights. You name it, I do it. And we have to, because in my mind, when it comes to fitness, and I think this is something that I've learned more over the last maybe 5 years or so, is I used to focus on one thing. Let's say I would focus on just running for a long time. But then when I focused on running, I felt like I was giving up in other areas. Or if I focused on Muay Thai, for instance, I trained quite a bit in martial arts. Sometimes doing that too much, I felt like I gave up in other areas. So I'm really trying to become a well-rounded athlete, not just a race car driver. So, my typical schedule right now during this lockdown, which has obviously made things very interesting. I usually start the week with Monday is very intense intervals on the rowing machine. Usually Tuesday we'll start with like an upper body lift with a little bit of explosion stuff towards the end, like a cardio. And then lower body lift on Wednesday with a little bit of cardio as well. And then typically Thursday, I try to do a recovery day, which is some easy cardio along with a lot of rolling and stretching, making sure I stay, very, very flexible, making sure my body's in line as much as possible, things that I've learned from you. And then Friday and Saturday, I like to move things in and out sometimes. So a lot of times I'm doing Muay Thai on Friday. And then maybe a total body lift on Saturday. I might be doing some bike riding. I might do like a long, 7 to 10 mile run. So that's kind of like the weekly work schedule. But when I'm going to a race, it's obviously a lot different. It's very, like I said, physical in these cars. So I'm not doing a lot of personal fitness while I'm at the track because I'm in the car so much. And for example, if we go to a test session, or a test, sometimes we'll rent the track for 2 days and go try new development parts. And it's just me and my one teammate. That car is running on track from probably 8 a.m. with a brief break from 12 to 1 p.m. and then running all the way through till 5. So either he's in the car or I'm in the car. But, sometimes I can be in the car for, 5-6 hours in one day. And, that gets pretty rough. So when I'm racing, or in the car, I usually try to relax on the fitness side of things. It's more just focusing on the racing, keeping my body hydrated, keeping my mind focused, making sure I'm getting enough sleep. So it's a difficult schedule. Regardless, you're up early, you're staying up late. You're trying to travel, where you're, sometimes have limited access to quality foods. A lot of preparation is involved in that kind of stuff. And those are things that I've, learned over the years of just making sure that I stay compliant as much as possible and stay in the right place.
Yeah. Most people don't realize how hard you exercise. So I know because we have a relationship and I do look at all your social media posts and, your body fat, you're lean, you're in shape, you generate power. So a couple of questions I know everybody would ask is, number one, is the leanness critical? I mean, I understand you want to be fit, but is the leanness critical? How long do you sit in the car? How fast does that car go? And the last thing is, I know I'm hitting you with a lot of questions, but I know you can handle it. How high does your heart rate go while you're in the car? Because when we talk about practice, you had a gut condition, all these things would lead to strain on the condition that you had to ameliorate. Otherwise, you weren't going to be able to be a professional race car.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess I'll talk about the stint length sometimes. A lot of times we're in the car for, like I said, 2 to 3 hours at a time, right? I've seen my heart rate as low as 120 beats a minute throughout that whole time. I've seen it as high as 160 ish, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. A lot of times you get a little bit of an ebb and flow too. So if we're doing long endurance races, sometimes you see that heart rate slowly start to drop throughout the stint because you just get more and more comfortable. You start to get a little more relaxed. You might not be fighting another car at that time. And you can see it start to drop to maybe, 130, 120. But then all of a sudden, maybe you get into a battle with the car and you can see it spike back up to 150, 160. We're doing a lot of movements in the car. So we're turning right, turning left. We got the heat. We're upshifting, downshifting. We're making adjustments on the electronics from, ABS settings, which is your brake settings, from traction control settings, radioing to the crew, what's going on with the car, what setup changes maybe we need to have during the next pit stop. So there's a lot of things going on, which just kind of makes that the mental capacity needs to be so large that, you stay focused and you do what you can do. Now, taking that and kind of implementing that style of work in my training, I try to hit different heart rates. And I think that's a really important thing. And it's something that people miss a lot too. Doing the same thing every day is not necessarily the right thing to do when it comes to training. So, I find myself that Monday, for instance, the rowing intervals, which is what I'm using for intervals at this time. I might see, if I'm getting really into it and it's let's say it's 10 500s, with maybe a 2-minute rest, I'm trying to keep that pace at a certain rate where it's still pretty quick, which could be a sub 150 per 500 meter row on each 10 rows. And this is at level 10 as well, if you have a concept 2 rower. So I might see, 190 beats a minute during that workout, but then making sure you understand that during that rest time, I'm not only resting, but I'm also breathing and doing other sort of mental things where I'm just trying to calm myself so where I can drop that heart rate as fast as possible. And then that way I'm ready for the next interval. And it might sound like that's not a big deal, but when you're in racing, sometimes we might have a caution, right? You might be in a battle in the heat of a win, but all of a sudden have a caution. You kind of want to use that caution as that time to relax, rest, refocus yourself. That way you can hit it even harder when that green flag drops. So using those intervals, it's not just a heart rate thing. It's also kind of a mental focus thing of turning on and turning off and learning how to tweak your breathing and your mindset during that time to do it right. And then finally, gut health is incredibly important. And I guess, I don't know if you want to get into the Crohn's disease stuff now or not, but, you can imagine that if you have a leaky gut or you have an inflamed gut or you have issues going on there, there's many things that can lead to. And obviously you're more of a professional about that than I am. We're more educated about it than I am. But, when I was around the time I was diagnosed, I did notice that I had some focus issues. And that was probably the first thing. And the second thing was just the physical aspect of racing was starting to take its toll. So once I've gotten better, and again, we can get into this in a minute, but once I got better, is really understanding how gut health can improve athletic performance has, in my mind, changed my career slightly, because it allows me to push myself in ways I haven't before, in making sure that I'm focused for maybe that 3-hour stint at an end of a 24-hour race. If you're fighting for a win, there's no time to take a break at that point, and there's no excuses. If you're fighting for the win, you have to go for it. So if you're not mentally ready for it, it's pretty tough. So it's a lot more difficult than people realize.
Yeah, and what was interesting, you were talking about the differences in the heart rate. So you're really going from anaerobic to aerobic, and very few sports vacillate between the two. It's really funny when you talk to people that they don't know the athletic endeavor that they partake in, what you are, but you're realizing, and if I would ask someone who's not familiar with a race car driver, do you realize, one, they're very athletic. I'm not trying to be funny, but they have to train for athletics. But the biggest strain is on our, the heart rate, going from one to the other, different systems. And then, of course, you have the mental acuity. You had mentioned Crohn's. So it's interesting because, one, you're in a seated position. Two, you're in a position, I don't know, are there flame retardants that you're wearing? So
yes,
protection. So that poses an issue. And three, you said it, there's stress. There's a physical stress and there's a mental stress. So those things must have brought out your Crohn's. So I'll take a step back. I know you have a story, and everybody should hear. Basically, you have Crohn's. You were diagnosed with Crohn's, and you had a bit of a story, i.e. a plight, if you will. Yeah.
So Crohn's has changed my life in so many different ways. I hate to say that, diseases are a blessing in disguise sometimes, but it definitely kind of rightened the ship at some point for me. I've had digestive issues my whole life, ever since middle school. And it started with a dairy issue, having particular gas issues during class, and finding ways to blame my gas on other people at the time. But it started there, and it would come and go throughout the years. I got into college and I was a bit all over the place. Sometimes I was great, sometimes I wasn't. I didn't think anything much of it. I didn't think much of it at the time, because it would just kind of come and go. And with typical college students, you might drink a little bit here, you might eat a pizza here, you might do little things, and it just wasn't a big deal. But it wasn't until after college that I really started to take. I felt like, I was always pretty healthy, but after college and when my career became, I became a professional and I was, making money doing what I love, I really took it to another level. But I very much struggled with my gut, and it got worse and worse from the time I graduated college to my late 20s. And it was, I believe, 2012 when it sort of all came to a head, and that's when I was actually diagnosed. But the 2 years before that date, and I think that was February 2012, those were probably two of the worst years I had physically in my life. I was tired all the time. I couldn't focus. I would get dizzy even just while driving down the street. I had horrible mood swings, aches and pains. I couldn't keep up with my workouts. Even just my mindset and my ability to think and understand and comprehend things was becoming a problem as well. And so you can imagine how that would affect the race car driver, which I had kind of already stated about the issues I was starting to have. I finally just said, listen, I can't deal with this anymore. This is affecting my career. It's affecting my livelihood. It's affecting my personal life. It's affecting everything around me. I'm not going to stop until I figure this out. So I started seeing a GI doctor, and, we talked, and I had multiple meetings with him over about a year, and I wasn't really getting anywhere. I just wasn't getting the results I wanted. I wasn't getting the information that I wanted, the diagnosis I wanted. Like, I just wasn't getting enough that where I felt I had a clear plan and a clear understanding of what was happening. So I walked into his office one day and said, listen, I want a colonoscopy. And I don't know many people that ask for colonoscopies, but, I wanted a colonoscopy, and we scheduled one pretty quickly after that. And I'll never forget. I mean, I literally remember it like it was yesterday. I'll never forget being on the procedure bed, waking up, because they put you under when they do that. And I remember my now wife, but girlfriend at the time, was right next to me, and kind of coming out and just trying to like understand, process what was going on. And the doctor comes like kind of pretty quickly to me, and he's got this concerned look on his face, and he goes, you have acute Crohn's disease. We took a biopsy to confirm everything, but I'm pretty positive on this. We have to take care of this quickly because you're headed down a really bad path. Now, the interesting thing is I wasn't having some of the severe symptoms that other people were having, but mine were very bad. Like not my symptoms, but my inflammation and the issues I was having within the terminal part of my small intestines were really bad. So we had, finally we had a diagnosis, which was great. But then it was like, okay, now how do I treat this? And then not to mention the fact there's kind of a mental thing about this where you start saying to yourself, like, how the heck did I get here in the first place? What am I doing wrong? Like, why me? That whole thing. And so we kind of had a plan. I mean, I kind of quote unquote a plan, which was, take an anti-inflammatory drug and try to eat healthy, and we'll see what happens. That was kind of that was what I got. And unfortunately, people that know me know that I don't really leave any stone unturned. I don't mind challenges. I like to overcome things. It's what I've done in my career multiple different times. So then I started to really try to figure out, okay, well, what else can I do to get better? Because in all honesty, even after 3-4 weeks of just that treatment alone, it was not working. It was actually getting worse. And we started talking about raising the type of drug that I was on. So maybe moving from an anti-inflammatory drug to, an IV, something such as like a Remicade. And I was very scared about those kinds of drugs because I had a friend who contracted lymphoma from taking the medication, and he had colitis, a pretty stout level of colitis throughout his whole life. So I guess to sum it all up here, Crohn's was a very difficult thing in my life, and it absolutely, that moment that I was diagnosed changed a lot of things for me. It finally gave me something to understand, something to pursue, something to try to beat and overcome. And fortunately, I was able to make the necessary adjustments by meeting with functional medicine practitioners such as yourself, to fortunately get over it, because the medication wasn't working. And even more importantly for me, I was able to get off medication entirely after about a year of that diagnosis. So that was a big moment for me of being able to say, hey, you know, I can do this, I can treat this. Well, I shouldn't say I treat it, but I can do this on my own. And we can, you know, we can overcome diseases if we do the right things. Now, I know everybody is not maybe as lucky as I am, but if you surround yourself with the right people, then I believe that you can make anything happen. And fortunately for me, it worked out.
Without question, you're a trendsetter on that, because I've seen you speak about it and it's so compelling. And with your ability to articulate at such a high scholarly level, people really listen. And your story is compelling because, I mean, you're a professional athlete and basically you weren't performing that well at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because the gut is the centerpiece of your health. 80% of immune cells are in your gut. Exercise over 2 hours puts a tremendous strain on your gut. So you having a gut, that's probably why you had such inflammation, but it was affecting your career, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it was on multiple levels, right? I mean, at the time that I was diagnosed, you know, we were just coming out of, you know, one of the biggest economic crashes, you know, the world has ever seen, right? And racing was in a very difficult spot as well. So you mentioned stress before, by the way, and that was one of the things I think that helped sort of snowball the beast, if you want to call that, and ended up sort of leading me down a path where my Crohn's was starting to get worse and worse. My digestive issues were getting worse and worse before I was diagnosed. And so I bounced around a lot for those few years. And, you know, you can imagine that, you know, let's say 1 minute I have a ride, the next minute I don't. I'm jumping into another ride, you know, and you have budgets that are all over the places. Sometimes sponsors show up, sometimes they don't. You know, sometimes programs are ready to go, sometimes they crash and burn. And, you know, when you get an opportunity, let's say if you're at one point, you know, I was sort of sitting on the side of the street looking for a ride. I got thrown a lifeline by someone and was fortunate to do well during that lifeline. But if I wasn't able to capitalize on that moment, my career could be over. And that's something that people don't realize. It's very difficult in our sport to not only become a professional, but it's also even more difficult to stay a professional, because in our sport, we are driven purely by sponsorship dollars. If the sponsorship dollars aren't there, you're not racing. So for instance, let's take a Major League Baseball player as an example. And I've got friends that play in the major leagues right now. If you're a lights out pitcher, you're a closer and you've got a, you know, sub 2 ERA, you're throwing 95 miles an hour, striking people out left and right, and you're winning games, most likely you're going to continue to play as long as you don't get hurt. You're going to be able to play. You're going to be able to play for a long time, and you're most likely going to get rewarded for that. Well, in racing, it's very different. You know, I've won championships multiple times throughout my career where the next season the team shut down. And you can imagine how tough that is on someone's sort of psyche a little bit. Like, I just won a championship. Like, you know, now I have to go find another job. And a lot of these teams, they don't have availability for people like myself. So kind of to wrap this all up, it's, you know, stress plays a big role, not just the physical side of racing, but the stress level too, I think was a very difficult thing for me to manage that helped sort of snowball this issue.
You know, it's funny, the way you describe your Crohn's, it's almost like an injury. You know, someone tearing their ACL, someone spraining their ankle, basketball player breaking his foot, something like that. And people don't realize how impactful your gut health is. I mean, you're doing a compelling story. Roger Federer, we always segue to Roger Federer. You know, he was allergic to gluten. He took gluten out and he won all his Grand Slam championships, and he's one of the greatest tennis players. So many people want to know, all right, you had this problem, you diagnosed it, you didn't use the medical route because it wasn't for you. What did you do? How'd you ameliorate it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is kind of why we're on this video. You know, I was diagnosed in 2012, like I said, I think in February. And about a month later, I met with my friend who had contracted lymphoma from taking a medication, a pharmaceutical, to overcome colitis. And fortunately, he beat that. And during that time, he was introduced to the world of functional medicine. So over lunch one day, he kind of explained his story to me as to, okay, well, this is what I did while I was not only battling colitis, but battling lymphoma. Meet with this doctor, start looking at this stuff from a diet perspective, lifestyle stuff. And he had a pretty good grasp of just the basics around functional medicine. So I went to a functional medicine doctor this was in Delray Beach, Florida. This is where they started it. I walked in this lady's office and I said, you know what? I don't care what it costs. I don't care what it takes. I don't care how long this takes. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. I just want to get over this. I want to get better. And I want to, make sure I can perform at a high level in a race car. So I was at that point introduced to, okay, there's supplementation, there's diet, there's lifestyle changes. And I think if you kind of look at that as sort of the trifecta in a way, if you get all those worked out, most likely you're going to have some success. Maybe not end all success for some people, but for me, it ended up working out. But at least let's start here and see what happens. So one of the things on the lifestyle thing I think is very important for people to understand is sleep. And that was one of my biggest problems during that time. Was I had a really hard time getting to sleep, and I had a really hard time staying asleep. So I kind of had the double whammy. And it was like that my whole life. I just always had that issue. So focusing on that was kind of priority number one to me. Then it was supplementation, making sure I take certain things like medical foods, certain vitamins, digestive enzymes, probiotics, fish oil, stuff like that. And then it was diet. So it was basically eliminating anything acidic. I was, without realizing it at the time, I was pretty much eating a low FODMAP diet, but I didn't really know that was what it was called at the time. But it was mostly just kind of, low acidic, very plain foods, very easy, sort of an elimination diet. And then, was able to kind of add things back in. Now, within 48 hours of taking this functional medicine route, I would say 80% of my symptoms were gone. And that was a good thing, because I left that first meeting and got on a plane and flew to a race. So by the end of that weekend, and this usually we're there 3 days, or we travel, it's usually a 5-day window, but we were at the track for 3 days. By the end of that weekend, my life was like blown, or my mind was blown, and my life was changed. I couldn't believe how much better I felt. But saying that, I still wasn't quite where I wanted to be, and I knew it was going to take some time. So you can say, we can kind of fast forward maybe 2 years or so, and this is when I was introduced to you. I wanted to take my performance to another level. I wanted to take my supplementation to another level, the diet to another level. My performance was everything to me. My career had come back stronger than ever. I was starting to feel a lot better, but I really wanted to take things to a whole nother level. And I think that was one of the great things about you, Dr. Silverman, was you were able to kind of understand what I was doing at that point, make adjustments, focus on certain things, explain to me why certain things maybe weren't working or were working. You were very educated on all that stuff. And I still remember, this is kind of a funny story. I still remember meeting you for the first time. And we were both at a meeting, I believe in California, maybe San Diego, right, for a certain nutraceutical company. Mm-hmm. And within 5 minutes, I think you rattled off like 30 things that I should be doing. And it was rapid fire. And I almost couldn't keep up with it, what you were saying at the time. And I remember just thinking to myself, this guy's either crazy or he just really knows what he's talking about. and that was kind of my introduction to your end, because you understand the athletic perspective of it. I think you understand it at such a high level that you were able to take the basics that I was doing and morph this into an all-encompassing plan that allowed me to basically, I guess you can't say you've eliminated Crohn's or it goes away forever, but I feel like I've eliminated Crohn's because I don't have the problems anymore. I don't have these issues anymore. And that was because of your thoughts and your ability to understand functional medicine and how it works with not only just everyday life, but also from a performance level.
Well, I appreciate the kudos. Thanks so much. But you're great. If everybody would come in and be as dedicated as you and, push the doctor, not challenge, there's a difference. Push the doctor, say, hey, here's what I want. Some people just they want a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And you know, if you're going to race in 2 hours, if you're LeBron James, let's say, you know, and you got to get a game that night, I get it. But overall, in health, that's the problem. People should not want a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And the tenets of functional medicine is to get to root cause resolution. So not only can we, I'll use the word ameliorate or relieve all the symptomology from the systems, ultimately build towards performance. And you were just locked in, and that's why I was so enthusiastic on that. So let's go over a few of the things. Your diet's impeccable. There's no gluten, there's no dairy. You eat virtually no sugar. You eat no fried foods. You're watching your inflammation. You're keeping your carbohydrates down. And I mean, the diet's critical. You are exercising virtually daily, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you're doing some supplements. I mean, you know, you can go over some of the things that you're taking and tell people. I think they'd be interested, you know, the berberine, the oregano oil, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think the foundation of my daily, you know, regimen, it starts first thing in the morning, and that's a shake that I take. So everything from, you know, a medical food, there's a certain, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say products on this video or not.
But, man. It's all good. We're non-sponsored.
But I take, right now, I take a Ultra GI and Ultra Inflamex Plus 360 from Metagenics. I take SBI Protect from Orthomolecular. I'm also taking Golden Fusion from Metagenics, a great product for collagen and curcumin. And on top of that, a couple performance supplements such as creatine. And it sounds kind of nuts sometimes, but I consider it kind of a performance supplement, just basic Celtic sea salt. Hydration is hugely important in what I do. I live in Florida, sweating a lot. I work outside as much as possible, or work out outside as much as possible, just to make sure that I'm sweating constantly. That allows me to kind of, you know, sport-specific training, for instance, because we reach, you know, temperature levels of 140 degrees inside the cockpit of the car. So whether I'm working out outside or using a sauna, 200-degree sauna, 190, 200-degree sauna for, you know, 30 minutes at a time to make sure I'm really exposing myself to extreme heats, very important. And then, you know, from other supplements, you have, you know, protein powders, digestive enzymes, a very good multivitamin called Phytomulti from Metagenics. And then you got, fish oils, SPMs, alpha lipoic acid, vitamin D plus K, and, you know, it's kind of an assortment of probiotics depending on what's going on. I like to, and this is something I think has worked for me, is sort of cycle on things here and there, because it kind of gives you different exposures that, you know, you could be lacking in one, but not in another. So making sure you get kind of a good variety on that point, you know, can help a lot. So, supplementation, you know, I think it's a lot more important than people realize. But the other thing about supplementation, and this just kind of came to me, is, you know, before I was diagnosed, I was a self-prescriber and a self-medicator. Now, I don't mean from a bad drug perspective. I just mean, you know, I would think one day, hey, you know, I need acai powder. And then the next day I need this certain fish oil. And then the next day I needed this probiotic. And, you know, I was literally driving myself crazy. I mean, and I mean it. Like, I can't tell you how many boxes of supplements showed up at our doorstep every other day, because, you know, not only was I trying different things, but I wasn't allowing it to actually set in and work. So 1 minute is this, 1 minute it's next. You know, I'm trying things for 24 hours. If I don't see some sort of help or an adjustment, boom, I'm on to the next thing. And that's where functional medicine practitioners come into play. And I think this is a really important point for anybody out there that's struggling with things. You definitely need help. It's not just, hey, I'm going to read a magazine here or walk down the vitamin aisle at the local grocery store. You need to have your hand held throughout this process. And I can't tell you how much stress that relieves when you have a great relationship with a practitioner or a doctor who can clearly see your problems, is willing to actually listen to you, to really understand your problems, and then also work with you hand in hand to make things better. And then you kind of also add in there constant communication. Like you and I are talking all the time, whether it's texting or phone calls, you name it, we do it. And making sure we stay on top of things, whether it's the new latest and greatest product, or, hey, this is what I'm feeling right now. How can we make this better? So supplementation is very important. It's very key, but it's also a bit of a mixed bag for people if they don't really understand what they're doing. So making sure you get help is really important. So that's probably the first thing on the supplement side. And then you start looking at diet. You kind of mentioned those things. I mentioned those things already. I try to eat as clean as possible. And, currently right now, what's been working very well for me is, I'm doing quite a bit of fasting. I don't really eat for 12 to 14 hours every night. So from the time I finish dinner to the time I take my shake in the morning, it's 12 to 14 hours roughly. That's been a big benefit. I eat usually 2 kind of larger meals a day, which is lunch and dinner. I actually don't even do a lot of snacking. On a rare occasion, I eat certain types of nuts, maybe in the afternoon if I'm very hungry, had a big workout day. And I guess the final thing is really just on the diet side is just making sure you eat quality foods. I mean, I do a lot of my own cooking. If I eat out, I know exactly where I'm going to go to eat. I know exactly what I'm pretty much going to order. I even study menus before I go there. This works really well when you're on the road, by the way. And making sure I can get what I need when I need it. And I constantly am always making sure I stay compliant as possible. So it's, there's a lot involved in all this, but in my mind, it's worth it.
Absolutely. Great summation of what you said. Number one, don't be the patient who expects immediate response in one day. 2,
Yes.
stick with the plan. 3, get a doc that you have a relationship with. It's true. I mean, you can text me, we can talk. We talk about a whole bunch of different things, and not the doc learns from the patients. And that's why that's my goal. I always want to be better the next day.
Yeah.
So that's great that you brought that up. And one of maybe the biggest thing is prepare. People, like I travel, I lecture, and people said, well, how did you find that place? I look for it. I prepared. I want to make sure I can get my food. It's so very important. Food is a potentiator for inflammation. Bad food is a potentiator for inflammation. You need it not to be inflamed, so you need it to be able to get the food. I mean, not every restaurant caters to someone gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, organic type ingredients. Everybody likes some different things, and different parts of the country have more access. It's just as simple as that. And that's great to hear. And you really are symptomology free from, we can say that. Now, a couple of questions before I say how they can get in touch with you. I always like to ask my guests something, and I know the exact thing to ask you. What is this thing about policies and procedures I always
That's a good one.
I gotcha.
My wife nicknamed me Mr. Policies and Procedures. And it's kind of been this running joke for a long time because I'm an extremely regimented guy. I love schedules. I love regimens. And there's a lot of reason for that too. It's hey, let's say you get off your path a little bit, or you kind of get caught somewhere where you don't get the food that you want. I know that when I cycle back to my schedules, cycle back to my procedures, I know that everything's going to snap back and I'm going to be fine. And so regimens to me are king when it comes to dealing with or trying to manage symptoms of any issue that you have, whether it's a disease or whatever. On top of that, I just think for daily life and for stress relief and for, keeping yourself in a mindset that you just feel calm and focused and clear, I think regimens can help that quite a bit too. Because that when you wake up, I wake up between 5:45 and probably 6:15 every morning. That's just when I naturally wake up. I know right when I wake up, I'm going to have that shake, right? So right around 6:30 to 7 o'clock, I'm having my shake. I know that around maybe 30 minutes later, I might have a little bit of coffee, a little bit of green tea, something with just a little bit of caffeine to kind of get that performance aspect going. Try to keep it in as natural caffeinated products as possible, such as coffee and tea. And then at 9 o'clock, I'm working out. And so from 9 o'clock to 10:30 right now during this lockdown. That's my workout time. At least that's my really explosive movement workout time. So I know that's always when I'm doing my thing. Then I come some usually a shower, relax a little bit. I'm eating lunch at noon. I have, computer work, phone calls, whatever you have in the afternoon. And then I'm eating dinner at 5:30. That's my regimen. And I'm actually very surprised that a lot of people that I've met that either have Crohn's disease, colitis, or other issues, a lot of them are kind of amazed by my commitment to policies and procedures. And you kind of just mentioned the stuff about traveling on the road and making sure you're prepared. I have everything itemized out. So every powder I take in the morning, every supplement or pill I'm taking during the days, my digestive enzymes at night, I have everything itemized out in little containers, little pill kits, everything. So I know when I leave my house, I know I am ready to go all the time, every day, any day, for as long as I need to. I have everything I need, and I don't have to worry about a thing. So that allows me to kind of continue that policy and procedure thing going forward. So I know it's a little bit of a long-winded answer there, but my wife thinks it's funny because I always kind of get on her about things sometimes, about making sure she sticks to a regimen, and she's not as much as I am. So when she doesn't, she starts to fall by the wayside. I'm like, well, if you just stuck to your policies and procedures, you'd be fine. So long story short, it's kind of like a joke we have in the family, in the household, but everything's great. And we, I don't mind it one bit.
I love it. I love it. Policies and procedures. And that is you to the T. There's no doubt about it. But you're right. If people in life have to follow a program, when you look at the most successful people, they are very, very regimented.
Exactly.
That they optimize time because you can't get it back. Mm-hmm. And you looked at your health, you realized how important health was, but you realized that health also led to your career and performance. And people need to understand that health is wealth. And you did say COVID-19, that's why you're looking a little like Daniel Stern. That's why I've got this background. I need a haircut. I have slow cooking here like I am 15. Trying to play basketball and look like Dr. J way back when. So yeah, it's great that you do that. So a lot of people are going to want to know how to get in touch with you. I know you work with some organizations, and I know you love to answer questions and share your story. How can they get in touch with you?
Well, I think the easiest one is social media. My Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook handle are at Lawson A Racing. You can also go to my website and send me a message right there through the contact form. And I've had a lot of success with that, actually. And one thing that I do quite a bit is I really do enjoy helping people. And I get people reaching out to me from all over the country, even into Canada. I've had people reach out to me from Europe, kind of trying to understand how I got better and what did I do. So I'm not a practitioner. I'm not a doctor. So I can't sit there and say, hey, you should do this, this, and this, and this. That's not my job. But what I'd like to do is when people contact me, I make the effort to match them up with someone. So a lot of people that I've matched up with you, Dr. Silverman, it's sort of my way of giving back to the Crohn's and colitis world, or people that have digestive issues. So don't be afraid to reach out, even asking random lifestyle questions or anything. No problem at all. Happy to answer anything you have. And then on top of that, I have done quite a bit of work with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. Actually very excited. We have something in this month, actually. The Crohn's and Colitis Foundation has something called the Day on the Hill, which is where we sort of vouch for certain legislation and rules and laws within the government. So it's like something I got to do last year for the first time. We're doing it again this year. A little different, doing it a virtual way. And then obviously at the races. So, anytime anybody comes to a race, they're more than welcome to stop by the car. One, they can check out the hot rod that we got, the Mercedes-AMG GT3, but also I'm more than welcome to talk Crohn's and colitis and health at any race. So feel free to check on my website, which is just www.lawsonaschenbach.com. You can check my schedule on there. And like I said, contact me anytime. So I love helping people as much as I can.
Fabulous. I will give you a testimonial. He is without a question a man of integrity. He's earnest in what he's saying, that he wants to help people. He always has time for everybody. He's a pretty good race car driver too. Yeah, that's what I hear. You know,
I would hope
you
so.
know what? He's actually a very safe driver on the road. He adheres to the speed limit. And it's been my pleasure. Everybody's going to love this recording. I really appreciate it. Let's do it again. Professional race car driver, great guy, Lawson, Aschenbach. I'm Dr. Rob Silverman, Proven Health Alternatives. Hope to see you again.